had long dreamed of a mountain hike to escape the bustle of the city. Our group consisted of 4 people: me, Jacob, my best friend Oliver, his girlfriend Sophie, and our mutual friend Leo. We chose a beautiful but less travelled route to enjoy the silence and nature. The first 2 days went smoothly. We followed trails, admired the landscapes, and took breaks by streams. Leo, as always, was the life of the party, cracking jokes and telling stories. But on the 3rd day, everything changed. We set up camp in a forest clearing. That evening, Leo said he wanted to take a short walk and snap some sunset photos. He grabbed his flashlight and left, promising to be back in half an hour. An hour passed, then 2, but Leo didn't return. We began to worry. He might have gotten lost, Sophie said, glancing around nervously. Oliver and I grabbed our flashlights and set out to find him. We called his name, but the forest was silent. It was eerily quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. When we reached the end of the trail, Oliver froze. "Do you see that?" he whispered. On a tree in front of us, someone had carved the letter L. It was strange. Leo often left such marks to play pranks on us, but how did he manage to do this here? Maybe it's a sign to help us find him, I suggested. When we returned to camp, Sophie was standing by the fire, her face pale. "I heard footsteps," she said. "Someone walked by, but it wasn't Leo." Her words sent a chill down my spine. We thought we were alone in this forest, or so I believed. The next morning, we called the rescue team, but they found nothing. They advised us to return to the city, but I couldn't leave Leo behind. The forest seemed to call me back. That evening, when we returned to camp, Sophie was trembling. Oliver looked like he still couldn't believe what had happened, and I remained silent. A few months later, I learned that the cabin had burned down years ago, and the woman, according to local legends, was a spirit who helped lost travelers. Who she really was, we never discovered. That hike left us with more questions than answers. We realized that nature holds secrets not meant to be fully understood. And although everything ended well, I sometimes think of that woman, her calm eyes, and how the forest came alive that night to save our friend. I had always been a skeptic. I didn't believe in mysticism, ghosts, or rumors about cursed places. But one day, something that happened at an evening school forever changed my perception of the unexplained. The beginning. The evening school job was a temporary solution for me. I got hired as a weekend night guard to earn some extra money. The old school building stood at the end of a street, surrounded by abandoned houses. Locals said the school was built in the early 20th century, and after a fire in the 1970s, it was partially restored. Many talked about strange occurrences there at night, but as a rational person, I dismissed it as nonsense. My first night on duty, that Saturday, I arrived a bit early. The streets were already empty, and a single streetlight dimly illuminated the road. Unlocking the creaky old door, I stepped inside. The dimly lit school hallways greeted me with an eerie silence. My office was located on the first floor, next to the teacher's lounge. Everything was quiet. I walked through the floors, checking if all the windows and doors were locked, making sure there were no intruders. Settling into an old wooden chair in my room, I turned on a desk lamp and prepared to read a book to pass the time until morning. Around 10 p.m, I heard footsteps. They came from the upper floor. I thought maybe someone had snuck in and headed upstairs with my flashlight. The second floor was empty, but I noticed a strange dark mark on the floor, as if someone had walked there with muddy shoes. Probably just my imagination, I thought, and returned to my post. Whispers in the dark. The clock showed 11:30 p.m. when I heard something again. This time, it was a faint whisper. It seemed to come from the physics classroom on the second floor. I grabbed my phone and flashlight, climbed the stairs and opened the door. The classroom was empty, but the whispering persisted. It seemed to come from the corner where an old cabinet stood. As I approached, the flashlight flickered and went out. I froze, unable to believe what was happening. Suddenly, the cabinet creaked, as if someone inside was trying to open it. I quickly flung the doors open, but it was empty. Only the stale smell of dust and wood remained. Returning to my room, I sat down and tried to rationalize. Maybe it was the wind or just my mind playing tricks on me, but the whisper had sounded too real. A strange discovery. A little after 1 a.m, I decided to do another round of the building. Passing by the gym, I noticed the door was ajar, even though I was sure I had locked it. Entering, I turned on the lights and froze. Someone had drawn a circle on the floor with chalk, filled with strange symbols. In the center of the circle was an old, worn-out backpack. It looked like it had been there for decades. I stepped closer and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a school class. On the back, it read, 1974. My heart raced. I remembered that this was the year of the fire that had taken several students' lives. Suddenly, the lights in the gym flickered, and I heard a creaking sound behind me. Turning around, I saw a shadow in the corner. It didn't move, but resembled a human figure. Panicking, I turned off the lights and ran out of the gym, leaving the backpack behind. The unexplainable returning to my room. I locked the door and sat down, trying to calm myself. But soon, the whispering returned. This time, it came from the hallway. Summoning courage, I opened the door and looked out. The lamp's light illuminated only part of the corridor, but in the distance, I saw the door to one of the classrooms slowly closing. I walked toward it. The history classroom door was slightly ajar. Peeking inside, I saw that someone had written on the chalkboard in white chalk, "They are still here." I stumbled back but slipped and fell. When I got up, the shadow appeared again. It stood motionless, and an icy chill emanated from it. I closed my eyes, expecting the worst, but nothing happened. When I opened them, the shadow was gone, and the hallway was silent once more. Morning, I didn't sleep until dawn. When the clock struck 6 a.m, I packed my things and left the school. The director was waiting for me at the entrance. "How was the night?" he asked with a slight smile. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to tell him everything that had happened. "Quiet," I replied, but my voice shook slightly. Since then, I've never returned to that school. A few years later, I learned it had been demolished and replaced with a shopping centre. But sometimes, I still think about that backpack, the photograph, and those shadows. Whatever it was, it stayed in the past. Or maybe it's still waiting for someone new in the silence of the night. Dark night in a small town. That evening, a small town, hidden amidst endless forests, was engulfed by a thunderstorm. The rain didn't just fall, it poured in torrents, turning streets into raging rivers. The pounding of raindrops and the crash of thunder drowned out all other sounds, creating perfect conditions to remain unnoticed. It was on such a night, after 10 years in prison, that a criminal escaped, a man whose name still sent shivers through the town's residents. His name was Jack Coleridge. Once an ordinary man, one night of uncontrollable rage had turned him into a murderer. 10 years ago, he had brutally killed his neighbour's family over a land dispute. He was caught thanks to a young witness, a girl named Sarah Miller. Her testimony had been the deciding factor in court. Now, Jack was free. His purpose was clear: revenge. The rain song and shadows of the past. Sarah had long given up on trying to forget that horrible day. Despite the lingering fear, she'd chosen to stay in her hometown. Now 28, she lived alone in a modest house on the outskirts. The stormy night caught her by surprise as she sat in her armchair, wrapped in a blanket, watching TV. The sound of rain and thunder fused into a relentless, monotone rhythm. At one point, she heard a strange noise, a knock on the window. Startled, Sarah froze for a moment before cautiously approaching the curtain and peering outside. She saw nothing. The darkness and pouring rain concealed everything, but she thought she glimpsed a shadow flicker in the distance. Trying to calm her nerves, she told herself it was just her imagination. But her unease grew when a loud thud came from the door. "Who's there?" Sarah called out, trying to sound confident. No answer. Face to face with the past. Sarah grabbed her phone to call the police, but the line was dead. The storm had knocked out the connection. She rummaged through the closet and found her late father's old hunting knife. holding it tightly. She crouched in the corner of the room, her heart pounding. The seconds felt like hours. Then, suddenly, the door crashed open, its hinges splintering under the force. Standing in the doorway was Jack Coleridge. His soaked clothes clung to his body, and his eyes burned with a terrifying intensity. "Hello, Sarah," he said with a chilling smile. "Did you think I'd forgotten?" Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "You're not getting away with this, Jack. They'll find you," she said, trying to steady her trembling voice. "They won't find anything," he replied, stepping closer. Sarah retreated slowly, clutching the knife tightly. An unexpected turn. Jack took another step toward her, but suddenly froze. His attention was drawn to a beam of light cutting through the rain. A car approaching the house. Seizing the moment, Sarah darted toward the stairs leading to the second floor. Jack lunged after her but was too slow. She managed to barricade herself in one of the rooms, frantically thinking of her next move. Meanwhile, the person arriving at the house turned out to be her friend, David. He had come to pick up some documents for work, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding inside. David stepped out of his car and noticed the open front door. "Sarah, are you home?" he called out. Jack, hearing the voice, hid behind the door. As David entered, Jack ambushed him. But at that moment, Sarah burst out of the room, clutching the knife. She screamed, distracting Jack long enough for David to land a punch on him. The fight for survival. A fierce struggle broke out. Jack was strong, but David was faster. Summoning her courage, Sarah rushed to help, trying to stab Jack. But he dodged and managed to grab the knife. Turning the blade toward them, Jack menacingly advanced on the pair. At that moment, the blare of sirens cut through the storm. The neighbours, noticing the broken door and strange commotion, had called the police. Jack attempted to flee, but David grabbed his jacket and Sarah struck him over the head with a heavy lamp. Jack collapsed just as the police burst into the house. The end of the nightmare. Jack was arrested once again. This time, he faced a life sentence without the possibility of parole. It took Sarah and David some time to recover from the ordeal, but they found solace in knowing the nightmare was finally over. The townspeople hailed Sarah for her bravery, and at last, peace returned to her life. That night changed everything. Sarah realized that while the ghosts of the past might resurface, they can be confronted and defeated, and the small town would never again have to whisper the name Jack Coleridge in fear.